Good Vach, and almost Erev Yantif. Baruch Hashem, we are learning the second parak of Maseches Pesachim. Today's Amud is Daf Mem Amud Aleph of Maseches Pesachim, and it is the 12th day of the month of Tishrei, with Yantif. The 13th day of the month of Tishrei, with Yantif just around the corner. Got something over there. Okay. And the Gemara left off at the bottom of Daf Lamed base with a statement of Rabbi Shela. Rabbi Shela, 4 lines from the bottom. 5 words from the end of the line. Amri de Bei Rabbi Shela. They said in the base medrash of Rabbi Shela, Vatika Shari, that it is mutar to make this stuff called Vatika. Which is some kind of pastry made out of flour. Vatanya, and the Brisa says no. Vatika also. Vatika is not mutter to make. So we say, look, Kasha, that's not a problem. How do you have machlokas whether it's mutter? It's also look, Kasha. Had the avdi b'mishcha milcha, had the avdi b'mayo milcha. It depends. Did you make it with oil and salt, or did you make it with water and salt? If you made it with water and salt, then it's going to be awesome because that could make it into chametz, but oil and salt together is not going to create the chametz process. Amar Zudra says, "Lo limchi inish keder bekimcha de avishna." You should not make you shouldn't line your pot. You should make your crumble at the bottom of the pan with roasted grains. Because maybe it's not going to get cooked all the way through, and it's going to end up being chametz. Amar Rav Yosef says, Yosef loy lichlot inish. Turning over to Mem Amud Aleph. A person should not scald two pieces of wheat kernels together. Why? Don't put them together. Drop them into boiling hot water. Scald them together. Why? Because what's going to happen is one of them is going to get lodged into the other one. And the water is not going to have equal access to all 4 sides. For all four sides of this kernel, what's going to happen? It's just going to get a little bit wet, and then it's not going to be scalded. It's not going to be cooked through that a little bit, and it's going to turn into chametz. That it's going to turn into chametz, and that is going to be a problem. V'amar Abaye says, "Lo lichroich inish trei shibuli behadei adai." Don't singe 2 stalks of wheat together. Why? Because what's going to happen is liquid is going to come out of one of them and it's going to be absorbed into the other one, and it's going to end up becoming chametz. So Rava challenges this. If that's the case, then you shouldn't be able to roast to put any kernels at all on your barbecue. Why? Because water liquid is going to come out of one side, it's going to end up in the other side. So you can't put any kernels, any grain on a fire, because some water is going to come out of one part and go into the other. It's going to make it into chametz. Rava said, no, the reason the whole thing is mutter. The whole thing is mutter and ganzen. You could have 2, 15, whatever you want. Why? Because mei perus ninu. Because this isn't water. This is called mei perus. Mei perus einan machmitz. And mei perus does not make anything into chametz. It's just fruit juice. It is not water. Abaye and Abaye, as a result of Rava's conversation with him, retracted from his original opinion. Dechol agav midlaihu loy mechamse. As long as the grains didn't absorb any external liquids, they would not turn into chametz. The Amar Abaye says, how do you know that he retracted? Because we have a memor of Abaye. Hay chatzva de avshina. If you have a jar that you have for roasting grains, a chatzva is a jar that you use for roasting your grains. So svicha shari, if it is upside down, if it's inverted, then it is all going to be, if it says chifa, shari zikifa also, but if it is upright, then you are not allowed to use it. Rava says, I feel zikifa nami shari, he thinks that it's also good to use. Mei peris, then because it's all mei peris in machmitzim, mei peris doesn't make anything into chametz, meaning Abaye's opinion was that you could roast it so long as you did it in such a way that it's not going to be sitting in liquid. He disagrees with Rava about mei peris, or that this liquid is made peres, but as long as it doesn't have the ability to be reabsorbed easily, there's not going to be a problem. Tana Rabbanan, the Brisa says as follows: "In lotzim sa'orim Pesach, you are not allowed to roast, to soak sa'orim barley on Pesach." Just a word of introduction to the next Amud, half Amud of Gemara. We have to remember that we buy all of our stuff, all of our matzah certainly before Pesach. Meaning any baked goods, we're not baking things that might become chametz on Pesach. But in the days of the Gemara, they absolutely did. Absolutely, they were making stuff. We discussed this in the first parak. They were making stuff on Pesach that could absolutely have become chametz. And says the Gemara, "In lotzim sa'orim Pesach, don't soak your sa'orim, your barley on Pesach. V'im lasas." And what happens if you did soak it? So lechatchila, you shouldn't do this. But if you did it, nis baku, if they split open asuras, then the whole thing's going to be asur because the liquid has gotten in, and by the time you've roasted it, whatever. Later on, it's already had liquid coming in contact with it, and it's going to be awesome. So, learn is bakum mutaris, but if the grains didn't split, then the whole thing is still going to be mutar, although it's not a good idea. Rabbi Yossi says, if it starts splitting, Rashi explains, what if you see that it's starting to split, so what do? Put some vinegar in it. So, or soak them in vinegar, but sometime, and the vinegar is gonna seal it all up. Shmuel says, no, in halacha Rabbi Yossi, we don't pass on Rabbi Yossi. This is a very high stakes game. We're not going to play those kinds of games. In halacha Rabbi Yossi. Amar Reb Chista, Amar Ukva says Reb Chista, Amar Ukva loynis bakum amish. The issue is not only if they actually split open, but if they soften to the point that you put them on top of a wine barrel, and the fumes from the wine would make them pop open. So just a little bit of being exposed to, I suppose, the acidity of the wine vapor, that would be enough to split them open. Then it is already a problem, even if they are still closed. Shmuel says, "Nisbaku mamish." No. In order for you to say that it's us for you to use these grains that they are now considered to be chametz, they need to have split open actually, not just be almost ready to split open. Shmuel actually did this in the hometown of the house of Bar Chashu, Nizbaku Mamish, and he paskened that it means Nizbaku Mamish, that it's only also if they split open for real. Our Rabba says Bal Nefesh lo yiltos, that a Bal Nefesh, meaning a pious person, a frum person, right? From in a real sense, lo yiltos should not soak their grains. Says the Gemara, my area Bal Nefesh. What do you mean a Bal Nefesh? If you're from, I feel everybody should not soak their grains down Tanya, because we said in the Brisa, that you shouldn't soak your barley on Pesach. Says the Gemara, Hachi kamar Bal Nefesh afilu chitin de shiriri lo yiltos. No, what he means is a Bal Nefesh, a from person, God-fearing person, pious person. Afilu chitin, even wheat, not just barley, even wheat, de shiriri, which is it's very chazak, it's very strong. Lo yiltos, you should not soak that. It's going to take a much longer time for those things to pop open. But a Bal Nefesh shouldn't soak them. Meaning, what are you going to do instead of soaking them? What would you do instead? You would take it and you would grind it together with the shells, and you would use that all together. Meaning, you're not going to soak it to get the wheat kernels out. You're just going to grind it all up and then sift it however you're going to sift it. But you're going to end up with some bits and pieces of it. Meaning, it's going to be a lower quality of bread as a result of this. That would be the reason that you would want to have soaked it beforehand. So, Amalei Rav Nachman says to him, "Man tzad leil Abba." If you listen to Abba, Abba's talking about Rabba, meaning his name was Rebbe Abba. So, man tzad leil de Abba. If you listen to Abba, achel nama ifusha, you're going to end up eating moldy bread because your bread is going to have all this other nonsense in it, all the garbage. It's not going to be good quality flour. Daha be Ravuna Latzi, because in Rav Huna's base marriage, in Rav Huna's home, they absolutely soaked their wheat. Ube Rava Bar Abin Latzi, and so too. This was the practice of Rava Bar Abin. Rava Amar, but Rava himself said, "Asur liltas." Rava was very machmir here. He held like the opinion of Rabba. He said it's asur to soak your wheat. So he says, Ella had Tanya, but what about the Brisa in Lotzim Sa'orim Pesach? You're not allowed to soak your Sa'orim, your barley on Pesach. Sa'orim Hundelai. Sarin. That's what you're not allowed to soak. Ha chiti shari. Wheat is obviously mutter. This was the challenge issued against Rava. So Rava explained, no, lomi bayikama, that not only are you not allowed to soak your wheat, you are also not allowed to soak your barley. Meaning, it's very obvious that you shouldn't be able to soak wheat. Why? Lomi bayichitin, you don't need to. Obviously, you don't need to even talk about wheat. That would obviously be also kevin the isbe tsiria, because it has cracks and crevices. Maya, water is going to seep in. But with regards to sa'uri, with regards to barley, the she, that's the very smooth, you might have thought that it would be mutter to soak your barley because it doesn't have cracks and crevices. Kamash Malan, the Brisa is telling you that even barley is also. Meaning, we thought that wheat is you could be more makel with. Rava says no. The Brisa is telling you the opposite. The Brisa is saying that barley is makel, but wheat obviously would be also. Hada Amar Rava, and then we're going to see Rava is going to be shifting in his perspective here. Hada Amar Rava, then Rava said, mutter liltus. I could see it the other way. I think maybe perhaps it is mutter. It's mutter to soak the barley. Why? What's the proof of this? I have another brisa. The Tanya Yotzim Pasnikia, that you are allowed to fulfill your obligation of Matzah Pesach with clean bread, meaning with bread with fine flour, veharda, and with coarse bread. But you would not be able to have clean bread if you hadn't soaked it, which means that you must have been able to soak it. It cannot be that the Brisa is holding fundamentally that it is also, unless this would be two different Tanaim, and we never want to invent a machlokes Tanaim if we don't need to. Says the Gemara, this is Rava's second piece of reasoning. So first time he thought maybe it means that obviously wheat is also. Now he's saying no, I think wheat is mutter. He says the Gemara, Rava disagrees with Rava. He says, hold on. Why do you mean that the second Brisa is telling you that pasnikia can only be made from soaking the flour, soaking the wheat kernels? So the Brisa says as follows: Hakimchin v'ha selatos shalnochin, the kemach, the flours, v'ha salatos, and solid is fine meal shalnochin that belongs to non-Jews, made by non-Jews. Shel kfarim, if it is of the kfarim, meaning if it's the those that are made in the villages, taharim, then it's all going to be tahar, then it's going to be pure. With shel krachim, but if it's made in the big cities, tamim, it's all going to be tamim. What's the difference between the kemach, the flour, and the meal that you buy of nachrim in the villages versus the big cities? The kfar my time is it not because the reason that it's mutter to come from the small towns, the small villages, is mishum delaylatzi, because they're never going to soak it, and if they didn't soak it, then it didn't become a davar mekabel tumah. Because in order for food to be able to be mekabel tumah, to be susceptible to tumah, it needs to have been come in contact with water, and that's why the ones from the villages are okay. Because they haven't come in contact with water, means they weren't soaked. V'kari le soles, and the Brisa still calls it soles, still calls it fine meal. Still fine. Says the Gemara, no. When we differentiate with regards to the the villages and the cities, we're not talking about the soles. Soles is going to be a problem no matter what. It's only going to be the kemach that depends, the flours that are made out of other grains, but not that's made out of flour. Says the Gemara, Basar the Nafik, after Rav left. So Papa says, he says, my time I had a good response to it. Why didn't I say this? My time had the Amar Rabbi Zera, from what Rabbi Zera taught us. Amar Rav in the name of Rabbi Amar Yomi, Amar Shmuel in the name of Yomi, in the name of Shmuel. What about the chitin that's wheat, not just zealous of other grains, but chitin, which we know is wheat, that has to be wheat menachas, that comes from menachas, and don't soak them, and it's still called fine flour, even though it is made out of wheat, and you're not allowed to soak them. Means that you can make fine flour. Still could be called fine flour even if you didn't soak them. Hada Amar Rava, and then Rava came back and he said, once I've considered all of this, not only is it not asr, not only is it mutar, mitzvah liltos. Rava then came around to the opinion that it is a mitzvah. The right thing to do is to soak your wheat before you use it. Shenema. And he says, I'll explain to you how I know this. Shenema, the pasuk says, matzahs, you have to guard the matzahs. So how are you going to guard the matzahs? If you haven't soaked them in water, when and why would you ever need to guard them so that they don't become chametz? If you're talking about guarding from lisha, from the point in time that it is being needed, that it doesn't come in contact with chametz, with water that has been turned into chametz, shima delisha lav shimru. Guarding from the point in time of lisha, that's not going to help you. That is not going to be a sufficient guarding. Rashi here says, because if you haven't watched out before that, then there's no point in watching it from the point of lisha. So he said, the Amar Rav Huna said, but with regards to the breads, the doughs that are made by non-Jews, a person can fill his stomach with them on the first night of Pesach, meaning so long as you know that it's not chametz. So long as you make sure to have a kazayis of real matzah by the end of the meal. At the end of the meal, that's when you need to have it. But not at the beginning of the meal. Meaning, you only fulfill the mitzvah of matzah with what you eat at the end of the meal, because that would seem to be is the primary matzah. Rashi points out, not when we make the alachilas matzah at the beginning of the meal, but Rashi points out, he mitzvahs achilasa. That's the real mitzvah of achilas matzah. Because the mitzvah is to eat it together with the korban pesach, and that was eaten ba'afikom. That was eaten at the end of the meal. Like the pasuk says, al matzah umroim yochluhu. You have to eat it together with matzah. Pesach nechal al seiva, and it has to be eaten while you are satiated, like we are going to see on Kuf Yotesef base. Please God, a few months into the future. And we're going to see that in the 10th parak of the Maseches in Pesachim. So we'll see this din coming back up around at that point in time. So the din is that you are allowed to eat the Maseches of Nachrim, even though they haven't had shimmer. But in order to fulfill your mitzvah matzah, it has to have shimmer from a long time before that. My time delay of it behu shimmer. And the reason is because you haven't watched them. You haven't watched them, meaning even though they're not chametz, there is an additional mitzvah of shimmer, not just to prevent it from becoming chametz. So let him guard it from the baking process and onwards. You need it to be watched from a well beyond that point in time, meaning much earlier than that, which must be right from the beginning, and therefore we are going to conclude something. So what's the something? Umi mai. How do you know that this is talking about that you have to soak your matzah, your grain before that, your wheat before that, in order to make it into matzah? Maybe that's different. Because at the point in time that you need to watch it, that's when you need to watch it. And if you didn't got it, even though it didn't become chametz, you're not allowed to use it. But the moment that guarding became necessary, you did watch it. Meaning, guarding from the point in time of shimur, of lisha is also called shimur. Meaning, at whatever point in time it came in contact with liquid, that's when you need to start watching it from. Doesn't imply that it must be mixed with liquid beforehand, because otherwise there would be no need to watch it. It just means from whatever point in time you have to watch it. That's when you have to watch it. So that's how the Gemara says. And even so, Rava was not satisfied. He didn't retract his opinion. Because he said to the people that were flipping over the sheaves of wheat, when you flip over, when you pile up the wheat, you should do it for the sake of the mitzvah. Meaning, Which means that he requires shimur, which seems to be that the mitzvah should be lishma, that it has to be made lishma from the point in time of the earliest stage possible. From the beginning of the grain making process, mamish until the very end, from the moment that you have the grain, from the harvesting and all the way through, from ktsir ve'elach. And that's what you need shimur for. And it seems to be that this was the opinion of Rava, and this was not muskam by the other Amoraim. Mar Berei de Ravina, Mar the son of Ravina, turning over to Mem Amud Beis, Me Nakta Le Ime Be'arve. His mother would store the grain for him in specific troughs. Rashi says, Ime Chitin Mitchilas Ktsir. So he was also machmer for this opinion of Rava and Be'ezhem Baruch to be continued with Mem Amud Beis tomorrow on Erev Chag HaSukkos. Wishing everybody a beautiful day and looking forward to continuing tomorrow.